Buongiorno, welcome back. Now we're continuing with the Agenda 2030 workshop, survey on sustainable development goals through INVALSI data. In this afternoon, we have three presentations. There are 20-25 minutes for each presentation. At the end of presentation, we have time to do one or two questions. And I remember that anybody have question can type in general chat or speak together. And now we have the first presentation, Immigrant Performance Towards a Rating in OECD PISA 2018. Paola Giangiacomo and Valeria Tortora. Okay, Valeria, the floor is yours.
Okay. Hi everyone, I'm Valeria, and today I present the study conducted with my colleague Paola Giangiacomo, that she presents the second part of this presentation. This is the content of this presentation. The aim of the contribution, theoretical framework, hypothesis, sample, method, results, consideration. This work is a secondary analysis of project OECD PISA that measures 15-year-olds' ability to use the reading, mathematics, and science knowledge and skills to meet real-life challenges. The aim with PISA is to help to schools and policymakers to look within the educational system, look the mode of to teach and the school system. The way in which schools and educational system respond to the new challenges and opportunities that arise with migratory flows has profound economic and social implications. In most countries, native students achieve results well above their first and second generation immigrant colleagues. Our study, our analysis is located within this framework. Therefore, we have studied what reading skills the first and second generation immigrant students who participate in OECD PISA 2018 international survey obtain, evaluating whether and to what extent the school participated in integration in the school context. Entering the specific topic, to integrate it fully into the new country, mastery of the language of the host community is essential for immigrants. It is one of the major challenges that immigrant students face, and many immigrants never reach an adequate knowledge of the language of the host country. The creation of an equality educational system able to offer all students the same learning opportunities has always been a central node in the debates related to the effectiveness of the national school system of the OECD countries. In the literature, the most important variable that which contribute to improve the performance of immigrants are to speak the language of country and socioeconomic status on family of students. Several studies show that speaking a language other than that of the test always leads, other things being equal to be decreases the score obtained. The effect of economic status on student achievement have been extensively studied, and research has shed light on specific mechanisms that link economic, social, and cultural heritage in the family context to student achievement. Based on what has been said so far, we have three hypotheses. Is the language barrier overcome if the test language is spoken at home? To explain the educational disadvantage of first and second generation immigrant students, it's necessary to analyze the role played by the socioeconomic aspects of parents. Are the territorial gaps also evident between immigrant students from the north and those from the south? The survey students are representative sample of the population of grade 8, 9, 10, and 11 students. About 20,000 Italian students participate in PISA 2018. In this table, the students are divided by type of schools. The majority of immigrant students are still enrolled in the low secondary education. The presence of immigrant students within licei is clearly less than that of the native. On the other hand, in technical, professional, and vocational trainer, their presence is higher. Even among the 15-year-old students present in the secondary schools, first-generation immigrants are more than the second-generation immigrant colleagues. This data somehow communicate to us that foreign students prefer vocational courses over more licei. It seems that they tend to ensure a school path that can guarantee their insertion into the world of work. In this table, the students are divided by geographical area. Adding the first and second generation immigrant students, the percentage rise to 30.7% in the Northwest, 16.4% in the Northeast, and 3.7% in the South. This data inform us not only that families have seated in the place of greatest possibility of employment for them, but in perspective for their children. In the southern areas, the attendance rates are very low. Describe analysis of the differences between native and immigrant students in order to highlight the external of the two groups gap. Making use of linear regression models, we will be able to understand how students' proficiency is influenced by immigrant and socioeconomic status, and to estimate it to what extent the interaction of these two variables has a cumulative effect. International surveys such as PISA report students' performance through plausible values. We included some variables of the OECD reports when presenting and discussing PISA, cross-country difference and similarities in the performance and characteristic of students with immigrant background. We included three variables which have been shown to be major predictors of PISA performance in the last edition PISA, and which are also susceptible to be relevant drivers of expect dropout rates, economic, social, and cultural status, is an OECD index measuring student socioeconomic background. As first and second generation immigrant students have different immigrant backgrounds, the results may, in many cases, vary according to each group. In consequence, we included this distinction among immigrant students. Language spoke at home controls for the fact that the language taught at school and the language spoken at home may be different. Thank you for your attention. Now Paola continues this presentation.
Thank you, Valeria. And now let's see together the results for our study. Native students obtain the best reading score within each geographical area compared to their immigrant colleagues. But looking at the graph, by analyzing the performance of the second generation immigrant students, it can be seen that in the Northeast, the second generation immigrant students reach averages statistically significant above those of the native students in the South and Island, 462 in the Northeast, compared to the native of the South and Island, 445. It's interesting to note too that the native student of the northern regions achieve statistically significant higher results with deviation of 50 points on average compared to students in the areas of the southern Italy, 512 in the Northeast and 445 in the South and Island. This graph and the following graph show the results of the students, natives, second generation and first generation immigrant students, divided by type of school attended and by geographical area. In reading this graph, it's immediately deduced that the second generation immigrant students who attend the licei in the Northeast, 543 points on average, have significantly higher performance than the native who attend the licei in the South and Island, 490 points. If the analysis moves between the first generation immigrants and the native, it's interesting to know that the first generation immigrant students of the Northeast achieve performances of 546 average points compared to the native South colleagues, who instead have 503 points, therefore a difference of 43 points. The data also show the same trend in the other types of school. The second generation immigrant students who attend technical institutes in the Northeast, 459 points on average, have higher performances than the natives who attend the same type of school in the South and Island, 428 points. If the analysis moves between the first generation immigrants and the natives, we note that the first generation immigrant students of the Northeast achieve performances of 456 average points compared to the native South colleagues, who instead have 422 points, with a difference of 36 points. Immigrant students are often exposed to more than one language. Many immigrant students must learn a new language when arriving in the adopted country. Other students may have been born in the country and gained some proficiency in the language of instruction, but speak a different language at home. Education research indicates that speaking a language at home, other than the language of instruction, may further disadvantage students. Students speaking a language at home, other than the test language, tend to reach lower levels of performance than students who speak the test language at home. This is not to say that a multilingual environment is an obstacle to achievement. In fact, students with a high level of proficiency in both the language of instruction and the language spoken at home might benefit from a bilingual environment. Unfortunately, in many immigrant families, using another language at home may indicate a situation of inadequate integration, where parents don't have the skills necessary to assist with homework, or students have not mastered the language of instruction because of limited exposure to it in their personal lives. These two factors may have a negative effect on students' ability to learn in the language of instruction. Through some questions of the PISA student questionnaire, it was investigated whether the students, natives and immigrants routinely used the language in which the test was administered, or a different language at home. The table shows that in Italy, about 18% of students speak at home a language different from that used in the PISA test. The percentage raised for second and first immigrant students, respectively about 55% and 70%. If we analyze the impact of the language spoken at home on the results of students in reading tests, it can be seen that it has a very significant impact. Students who don't speak the language spoken at school at home tend to have lower reading performance. The difference between reading performance is significant between native and second-generation immigrant in the Northeast. Between the native and the second, there is a difference of 45 points on average. Therefore, the possibility of practicing the test language at home is very important to obtain good results. Furthermore, there is a significant difference also between native and first-generation immigrant in the Northeast and in the center, with a high difference also in these two cases, respectively of 43 and 40 points on average. The differences between natives and non-native students are greatly reduced if the immigrants speak the language of test at home. When comparing the test scores of students who always speak the language of test at home with the scores of students who don't speak the language of test at home, test score differences range from 26 to 9 in reading. It's essential to explore the role that language plays in order to better understand immigrant student performance. Such analysis may help to reveal potential target points for intervention. Providing additional support to second language learners may be one approach to improving performance of immigrant students. The regression model presented in this table shows a regression analysis in which the origin variable and the average score obtained for reading tests were inserted. The immigrant condition has a significant effect on the results of students in cognitive tests in reading. In particular, being a second-generation immigrant student means having 37 points less in the reading score than the native students, and 49 points less for first-generation students. These data are both significant. The Socioeconomic and Cultural Status Index was included in the following model. The index was inserted to assess its incidence. By introducing it, the difference in reading score of 30 points is explained. So, if we consider the Socioeconomic Cultural Status Index, the advantage of the natives in the score decreases 22 points for the second-generation students and 29 for the first generation students, but it still remains significant. With this study, we have tried to show how it's possible, with appropriate analysis, models, and empirical data, to get a deeper and more realistic view of the factors that influence the outcomes of foreign students. Speaking a language other than the test language has a significant negative impact on obtaining a reading result, in accordance with the averages of the native students. Education systems, schools, and teachers have a decisive role in helping students of immigrant origin to integrate into their own community, overcome language barrier, and build their competencies, scholar, social, emotional, and motivational. This study is only the beginning of an in-depth study that we will do using other variables, such as the disciplinary climate. Further studies show that many of these differences are also related to students' perceptions of the disciplinary climate in the classroom and the support their teachers give them. The data also show that parents help make a big difference on school outcomes and effective placement in the school setting. In further study, it will be interesting to investigate these issues. To improve the performance of immigrant students, it's important to provide additional support for disadvantaged students and schools, ensure availability and participation in extracurricular activities, involve parents in extracurricular activities, make available language training, training a teaching staff aware of the diversity that is able to support everyone, the students. Migration flows have changed a lot in recent years. This makes it absolutely necessary to monitor the integration of non-native students. It is necessary to have datasets and information on immigrant students available. The INVALSI data allow us to analyze the situation of the students in depth. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Okay. I think that the results of this elaboration are always very interesting. And we can say two things, I think. As they say also, as we say also in demography, immigrants after a few years living in the host countries, like in Italy, take the habits of where they live. And so the second generation immigrants and first generation immigrants take the habits of the north, if they live in the north, of the south of Italy, if they live in the south. And what I ask myself is how can they be transformed, this result, in policies for policymakers? In the sense that we work with this data and we are well informed about this problem. I think that our politicians are not very involved in these problems, and it's important to communicate to the policymaker this result. I think so, to do some policies.
Yes, the results of immigrant students are affected by the effectiveness of the school system in each macro area, and therefore tend to follow the trend of the overall result for each of them. The scores of immigrant as well native students are higher in the north than in the south. PISA examines what students know in reading, mathematics, and science, and what they can do with what they know. Results indicate the quality and equity of learning outcomes, and should allow the educators and policymakers, as you said, Barbara, to take decision. we can the several research, international, national, but at the end we give the instruments.
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, let's go to the second work. The second work is INVALSI test and the Italian territory, a comparison between native and foreign students of grade 8. The same argument, and Jana Kopecna, Francesca Leggi, and Maria Carmela Russo. Maria Carmela Russo, start to talk. The floor is yours.
So the study I will present you today is a result of a collaboration with my colleagues Francesca Leggi and Jana Kopecna. The initiative for our study came from the intentions of better understanding the impact of recent migration dynamics on the Italian education system. We turned our attention to the learning research of foreign students. By analyzing both Italy-born and recently immigrated students, we highlight the characteristics of the phenomenon on the national territory. The analysis focuses on academic research in Italian language, available from the INVALSI standardized test at 8th grade science. The competence in the language of the host country is fundamental in the perspective of integration. As already said, the United Nations 2030 agenda includes 17 sustainable development goals intended to apply universally to all countries. It's a commitment to eradicate poverty and achieve a sustainable world by 2030 and beyond, with human well-being and a healthy planet at its core. So the study's research questions are related to the agenda's goal 4, ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. The paper focuses on 2 aspects. Firstly, at student level, to identify the factors that contribute to academic performance and determine the differences in the score in INVALSI Italian test between the foreign and Italian students of the first and second generation, so those born abroad and those born in Italy to foreign parents. Secondly, at school level, analyze the differences between Italian and foreign students in the results of the INVALSI Italian tests, in a perspective of the geographical areas according to the north-south trajectory, and investigate these differences by taking into account the classification of the inner areas. This slide shows the classification of the Italian inner areas defined by the Italian Ministry of Economic Development. In fact, in our analysis, we use this classification because the inner areas represent an effective tool for the development of various strategies based on characteristics and needs of the territory, on both regional and administrative level. In this context, school plays an active role because it should reinforce the relationship with the territory by responding appropriately to the various needs of students. This mapping of the territory is based on the identification of centers offering various services that are surrounded by other areas with different levels of peripherality. Along with the definition of these centers, it's possible to distinguish for other areas according to the level of accessibility that are calculated in terms of travel minutes from the nearest pole center. So if there are pole belt areas less than 20 minutes from the nearest pole municipality, intermediate areas between 20 and 40 minutes for the pole, peripheral areas between 40 and 75 minutes from the pole, and ultra-peripheral area over 75 minutes from the pole. The last three categories found the inner areas. So the Italian inner areas are significantly distant from the main centers offering essential services, for example, education, health, and mobility services, and they have important environmental and cultural resources. They are so a deeply diversified territory as a result of the dynamics of the various and the differentiated natural system and the peculiar and century-old process of anthropization. So this slide shows the differentiations of foreign students across the Italian territory. The majority is located in the north, particularly in the northwest, with 37.6%, and the lower values are found in the south and the islands. So now I would like to give the floor to my colleague Francesca, who will speak about the data and the results of the study. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria Carmela. Good afternoon. As I already said, we use the data of INVALSI national survey regarding the educational performance in Italian test of students attending 8th grade classes in academic year 2018-2019. After the data cleaning, the dataset contained approximately 550,000 cases. The method used were at the individual level, multivariate logistic regression, and at the territorial level, spatial autocorrelation techniques. The first analysis conducted was a multivariate logistic regression. This slide shows the percentage of correctness and the Nagelkerk R-square of the four models developed. This table, on the other hand, shows the values of the parameter XPB. This parameter can be used for the interpretation of the relationship between the variables. It expresses the variation of the dependent variable given by the student's performance in the INVALSI Italian test as a function of variation of the independent variable, such as gender, origin, ESGS, regularity, urban classification, and geographic area. In this way, it is possible to observe the relative likelihood or disadvantage advantage of students with certain characteristics included in the model to get an Italian test score above or below the national average. Generally, we see that there is a constant disadvantage of foreigners in achieving high levels of the learning in Italian. Specifically, we can draw some consideration from the models. In the first model, we can observe how the probability of obtaining a better results in the INVALSI test is the prerogative of the native female students. If we have the SGS variable, model 2, the relative advantage of native students is slightly lower, and at the same time, the disadvantage for foreigners of the first generation decreases. The transition from model 2 to model 3 shows the impact of the urban classification variable. There is a moderate advantage in raising in areas belonging to the pole or belt. showing almost equal values around 1.2. It should be noted again that the weight of the SCS is considerable, indicating for the high modality a very high probability of the students obtain a score above the national average. In the last model, we see that the geographical area variables has a very strong impact, showing a high probability for Northwest students to achieve a good performance in the INVALSI test. At the same time, in terms of advantage, increases the percentage difference between native students or foreign students of the second generation. In the paper, we use also some techniques of spatial analysis. The spatial partner of the score in Italian test across the Italian territory was analyzed by using global and local methods of spatial autocorrelation, global Morans high, and the local indicator of spatial association, PISA. The first indicator confirms the presence of significant clusters of the score across the Italian territory by comparing the value of the variable in one unit with the value in all other units. The range of values of this indicator is between -1, perfect dispersion, and +1, perfect correlation. Since the global Morans high does not provide any indication of the location of the clusters, we used the local indicator LISA. LISA has two important characteristics. First is to provide a static for each location with the assessment of significance. Second, it establishes a proportional relationship between the sum of the local statics and a corresponding global static. It allows us to identify two types of local clusters, high-high, low-low, and two types of local outliers, high-low. The bivariate version of this indicator captures the relationship between the value for one variable, x, for example, the score in Italian, in unit I, and the average of the adjacent values for another variable, y, for example, SCS. For example, the cluster high-high identifies schools with high values of a variable x in high value variable neighbor. For the correct working of the spatial autocorrelation methods, it is necessary to construct a weight matrix that defines a neighbor of the observed unit using the arc distance. First, to evaluate the spatial distribution, the univariate global Morans high, the score in Italian was calculated and the value 0.359 confirms the presence of significant clustering of positive values of the score across the Italian territory. As we can see from the maps of both univariate and bivariate LISA, the results clearly confirm the existing territorial division, while in the northern and central Italy is evident the presence of clusters of schools with better performance in Italian tests surrounded by schools with the score above the national average. In the South and Ireland prevail clusters of schools having lower values of the score surrounded by schools with the scores below the Italian average. The outliers with low values of the score neighboring with schools with high values are located mainly in the center-north of Italy. On the other hand, the clusters with low values of the scores neighboring with low values of the observed variable, and the outliers with high values of the score surrounded by schools with low values are situated in the region of southern Italy and Ireland. From bivariate LISA of the score and the SCS and the percentage of foreign students of the first and the second generation, it is possible to observe similar patterns of results of spatial autocorrelation of the score in Italian. The results of both the logistic regression at the student's level and the special analysis at the school level confirm the finding from the literature. There is a gap in the INVALSI test scores between Italian and foreign students, more specifically between the first and the second generation. Social, economic, and cultural status plays a pivotal role in school performance. From a territorial perspective, a student living in the inner areas has a lower probability of having a score above the national average when compared to the other students living in less peripheral areas. This disadvantage is even intensified when moving from the north to the south of Italy. The special analysis confirms the existing territorial division described by logistic regression. Future analysis might be to analyze characteristics that distinguish the second from the first generation of foreign students. Understand what are the characteristics of education in the inner areas, as there are an effective tool for the analysis of the educational system. The school must be a social elevator regardless of the geographical location and the type of students enrolled. We hope that this, together with other studies, will provide the basis for further action in this direction. Thanks for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much. It's very interesting, and it's linked with the plenary session of on inner areas. Are there any questions? Ecco, Lorenzo?
Yes, I have one,
yes.
just one. Good afternoon, first of all. Just a curiosity. Is it possible to see again the table with the results of your models, with the model parameters?
Yes.
I was just a question about how did you discretize the social background of students, because I noticed that parameter values are very, very high. You have 5 point, which on a logistic scale is very, very big. And so did you choose the quantile? How did you choose the reference? In your models, you have very low intercepts and very high parameter values. So just to understand, how did you discretize high, medium, low, low, and so on?
So the SCS index explain the totality of the results because it's.
But do you use? Did you use quartile or? For
No. We have. We did a code high, medium, low, low, and we didn't use the quartile.
Okay, but did you take the how do you say, the quartile? Quartili?
So
the threshold. The threshold is the quartile.
How did you cut the?
Yes,
the
I understand. Yes. We use for the record the quartile. Yes.
Okay. Just to know, because the parameter values are very high, so I was surprised by that. It's very rare to have a value of 5 in a logistic model, which means always. There's no uncertainty. It's a probability of 1 almost. So I was surprised by that, but just an information to.
Thank you for your question.
Maybe this is just an opinion. If you, instead of discretizing the value, if you took the original variable and center it around 0, maybe you could have parameters which are less extreme. This is just an observation, an opinion.
Okay.
I mean, if you discretize a continuous variable, you lose information. So you must be cautious, especially if there are very high parameter values.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your suggestion.
Okay. Okay, I have a curiosity, but a general curiosity, because we will know that after the curiosity is how the pandemic affect immigrants and natives and students in general, but how the impact was different in the north, in the south, in the inner areas, in the poles, because the pandemic started in the north. First of all, and in the north, the school were closed in February, and in the south in March, three weeks after. And in the inner areas, I think if in the city the lockdown was total, perhaps in the inner areas it was less. And I think the school were closed, but I think perhaps the people, the students, go in street and so on. But it's I don't know if there is a different effect in the north, in the south, or in the inner areas, or in the poles. We will only know after the next INVALSI test. Now is
yes, we could estimate this effect with the new data.
Yes, yes. Okay, let's go to the last work. Is targeting students with high risk of dropping out of school, a latent profile analysis. Giuseppina, Chiara, Sacco, and Chiara Sacco speech. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon to everyone. I'm sharing the presentation. And can you see? Okay.
Yes, okay.
Thank you. So good afternoon. This is the result of a joint collaboration between Giuseppina and me. And this study aims to analyze the Italian situation of dropping out of school using the INVALSI data and using as a statistical approach latent profile analysis. Quality education and lifelong learning opportunities for all are central to ensure a full and productive life for all individuals and for the realization of sustainable development. This is the goal 4 of the Agenda 2030, and the goal 4 is articulated into 10 targets. These targets monitor and conserve different dimensions, and in this work we will focus on target 1 that aims to ensure that all girls and boys complete free, equitable, and quality primary and secondary education. In Italy, the Italian National Institute of Statistics plays a crucial role as a referral agency for the production of the indicator for monitor the SDG. One of the crucial indicators to monitor the target 1 is the proportion of the early school leavers from education and training, ELIT, defined as a person aged 18 to 24 who has completed most lower secondary school and is not involved in further education or training. In Italy, also the rate of early school leavers decreased from 2008 to 2018. In 2018, based on Eurostat data, as we can see from the plot, The proportion of early leavers in Italy was around 40%, far higher than the European target and the European average, that is about 10%. The first critical element of the Italian school system and of the school dropouts seems to concern the transition from lower secondary school to upper secondary school. It has been demonstrated that the probability of completing the lower secondary school is higher than the one of completing the upper secondary school. The dropout risk factor connected to large disparities between gender, social, and ethnic groups can be found through the international literature on ILET, and their continuing impact show how resistant this systematic feature seems to be. Even few Italian studies analyze the phenomenon, highlight the impact of socioeconomic background and the gender difference. In addition to these dropout risk factors that are called in the literature as status factors, as for example the parental education, the socioeconomic status, the gender, and the family structure, there are the risk factors called alterable, such as academic failure, lack of attendance and motivation, misbehavior correlated to dropout. Several studies have indeed highlighted that students at high risk of dropout show a lack of expectation of staying in school. They report unsatisfactory relationship with teacher and classmates, expectation of failure, poor motivation, and low commitment. In all these cases, there is a high proportion of inadequate intrinsic motivation and low profit. In this study, first of all, we aim to monitor the transition of the students between the last year of the lower secondary school, the 8th grade, and the upper secondary school, in order to improve the efficiency of the dropout prevention program. Since the students differ in their motivation, preference, and perception of their abilities, it is important to identify the individual differences and understand and model the complex interplay between the variables. In this work, we try to outline the profiles of the students at risk of dropout, answering the following research question: which are the characteristics that accurately identify students more likely to drop out? In order to reach these aims, we exploit the data obtained by two different sources: the results at the INVALSI test and the students' questionnaire administered by INVALSI at the end of the lower secondary school in the scholastic year 2017-2018. And the administrative data of the inscription of all the students of grade 10 at the INVALSI test of 2019-2020. To monitor the student after the lower secondary school, we use the administrative data of the student enrollment at grade 10 to compute the binary indicator of dropout risking, matching the record at student level. The dropout risk indicator assumes value 1 if the 8th grade student is enrolled in 2019-2020 at the second year of the upper secondary school, and 0 otherwise. Thus, the group of the students identified by the null value of the indicator of dropout risk are those with higher risk of dropping out. And for sake of simplicity in this presentation, I will call the students with the indicator of dropout risk equal to 0, high risk group, and those with the dropout risk indicator equal to 1, low risk group. The exploited students questionnaire is characterized by the presence of several multiple choice that examine in depth 5 domains of students' life: the students' view of the school, the parents' support, the students' self-efficacy, the students' relationships with the peers, the students' future expectation. To estimate the latent continuous variable from the Likert scale data, we used the graded response model, and assuming a unidimensional approach. To account for the socio-demographic background of the student, we include in our analysis the index of socioeconomic and cultural status, the indicator of the immigrant status, the gender indicator, and the binary indicator of the late enrolled students. To account for the cognitive abilities of the students, we use the students' performance INVALSI test in reading and in math at the end of the lower secondary school. In the first step, a preliminary descriptive analysis to compare the characteristics of the low-risk and high-risk group has been performed, and from this table, we can see that the analysis reveals a significant difference in the distribution of the socioeconomic indicator, of the immigrant status, of the gender, and of the late enrolled indicator, comparing the distribution between the group at high risk of dropping out and low risk of dropping out. As we can see, the 43% of the students classified as at risk for school dropout are characterized by low socioeconomic background. On the other hand, focusing on the distribution of the socioeconomic indicator in the low risk group, it is evident that the population is equally distributed in the four classes. The 20% of the students at high risk of dropping out are immigrant of first or second generation, and only the 3% of the low-risk students are late enrolled, whereas this percentage increased to 20% for the high-risk group. Here we can see the comparison between the two groups in terms of median for the alterable risk factors included in the analysis, the motivation, the future expectation, the parent support, the relationship with peers, and self-efficacy. There is a statistical significant difference between the two groups for the distribution of the motivation, future expectation, perception of parent support, and self-efficacy. The high-risk group is characterized by high demotivation, low future expectation, low supports, and interest of the parents in the student's school life, and self-efficacy near the population mean, since all these variables for construction are normally distributed with mean 0 and variance equal to 1. Focusing on the students classified in the high-risk group, we use a latent profile analysis to identify the profile of the students in relation to several measurements: the motivation, self-efficacy, parent support, relationship with peers, future expectation, and the score at the INVALSI test in reading and math. Latent profile analysis is a latent variable mixture model widely used and known in literature. The aim of the latent profile analysis is to analyze heterogeneity in a population by identifying a number of existing but unobserved subpopulation of individuals, which are referred to as latent classes. To study the effect of the status risk factor on the estimated class membership, we use a multinomial regression model. To determine the optimal number of latent classes fitting the data, we examine the solution containing no more than 3 clusters for different parameterization of the covariant matrix. Here we can see the values of the Bayesian information criterion for 1 to 3 class solution in correspondence with several parameterization of the covariance matrix. A 3-class solution with a VVB, ellipsoidal varying volume, shape, and orientation parameterization that correspond to an unconstrained variance across mixture components, yielded the best fit for the data, resulting in the ISBIC. Here we can see the characterization of each class, each profile, in terms of mean score for each variable included in the model. Class 1, the one in black, represents about the 53% of the students with high risk of dropping out of school. This cluster is characterized by high mean of the motivation, very low mean on expectation for the future, low self-efficacy, low mean on school achievement. We can observe that the lowest mean value of self-efficacy is observed in correspondence with the students allocated in class 1. From the analysis of the relation between latent classes membership and the predictors, it is clear that class 1 membership is a growing function of the socioeconomic and cultural indicator and of the gender. The first generation immigrants have on average a lower probability to be allocated in class 1 than the second generation immigrants and the native. The mean probability of class 1 is a decreasing function of late enrolled indicator. Here we can see the characterization of the students allocated in the class 2. And we can see that class 2 is composed of about 80% of the students. This group is characterized mainly by 4 variables: the motivation, self-efficacy, and the performance at the INVALSI test. The students classified in this cluster show on average a strong demotivation and a strong self-efficacy. And this group have the lowest mean values in correspondence of both measures of cognitive skills, as we can see from the plot. The probability to belong to this class is a decreasing function of the socioeconomic and cultural indicator, and show a higher value in correspondence of late enrolled students and immigrant of first generation. The last cluster, class 3, represents about 29% of the students with high risk of dropping out of school. These students show a particular profile since they have a very high mean on future expectation, a moderate high mean on parent support and on self-efficacy, and a low mean on reading performance and math performance. The class 3 membership is an increasing function of the socioeconomic and cultural indicator. The probability to be classified in this cluster seems to be constant with respect to the varying categories of gender, immigrant status, and late enrolled indicator. In summary, we identified 3 profiles of the students at high risk of dropping out. The lowest average self-efficacy value is observed in students assigned to class 1. On the other hand, in the other 2 groups of students at risk of dropping out, the self-efficacy value is above the average value. Class 1 is also characterized, as I said, by high mean on the motivation, very low mean on expectation for the future, and low mean on school performance, and the belonging to this class is an increasing function, the socioeconomic indicator and the gender. The students that belong to this class can be called socially disadvantaged students. The students in class 2 are called in our discussion the students with low confidence in the school, since these students, despite having high self-efficacy, perceive going to school as futile, and consequently, they have low performances at INVALSI test. Students who belong to this class are more likely to be late enrolled students or immigrant of first generation, and considering these characteristics, this group, the low performance at the INVALSI test of this group could be given by a poor commitment in carrying out the test. So maybe in the next study could be important analyze more in depth this point, as could be useful to measure the student effort during the test using the item response time. The last cluster identified is the class 3, which we call low performer, and is characterized by, because this group is characterized by low performance at INVALSI test and by score above average in all the alterable variables. The probability to be classified in this cluster seems to be constant with respect to the to the risk to the status risk factors. Sorry, to the status risk factor. And what we observed is that probably more than the other group, this group is the one that benefit the most from standard dropout prevention programs based only on performance. One aspect that could clarify the characteristic of this group and that we will analyze in the future concern the members of the EFP. In this work, in the group of the students at risk of dropout, there are also those enrolled in these courses that maybe could fit in this profile. It is possible that these students are addressed to these courses because they have low performances and have high expectation for the future because they hope to enter the work world soon. The present study describes the characteristics of the students at high and low risk of dropout in Italy using the INVALSI data. In particular, this works extend the existing literature, analyze the students at high risk of dropping out using the latent model approach, demonstrated the presence of different high-risk students' profile in terms of self-efficacy, the motivation, future expectation, relationship with parents and with peers, and school performance. The findings of this work could be useful for targeting efficiently students for dropout prevention programs. Thank you, everyone, for the attention.
Thank you very much. It's very interesting.
Sorry.
Are there any questions?
Yes, I
Lorenzo, Maravilla.
Okay. It's normal. It's my habit. But if I understood properly, class 3 membership is up to a certain degree related to being a first-generation immigrant. Is it correct, or
not class 3, but class 2? Yes, class 2, because you can see here that in class 2 the probability of being a first-generation immigrant is higher, and then the probability decreases. Whereas sorry, I have some problem. Okay, whereas in class 3, I know that the pictures are not really good, so I don't know if you can see very well. There is this line in
okay, because I thought it was the lower line, which was quite suggestive, because if first generation immigrants have high expectation but a high risk of dropping out is a quite interesting point. I think it poses a high responsibility on schools if there are expectations that, but this is not the case. Okay, so I misunderstood the.
No, sorry, because I know that the pictures are really not very well.
It was
I
not
can see very well.
No, it was not a critic. I think it's very important study. I think it's an important issue, and you have to carry on. I think it's very important.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I have a curiosity and a question. It's very interesting that this work talk not only about performance, but also about other skill settings, motivation, parental support, expectation for the future. And let's say that in an ideal world, it would be enough to make economic policy for the first group, school policies for the second group, and educational policy for the third group, in an ideal world.
Yes.
But my question is, where did you find the nice round icons on the target 4? Because it's very beautiful, the round icons.
The first one.
Yes. Because the icons of SDGs are inflationado, si dice inflation.
Really, I just Googled it.
Yes, this one.
I tried to Google target SDG goal 4, and I just picked the image. So I think that this one was in the site of the UNESCO. I think that
UNESCO. Yeah, I think it's UNESCO because
Yes.
UNESCO use icons different between the SD. Also, UNESCO is in the United Nations. UNESCO use number, name of indicators or icons a modo suo, in his way. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other question? Ok. Cristina ha alzato. Ah, ok, Cristina Stringer.
Thank you very much. Very interesting to me personally also. I think that your profiling really shed some light on the fact that you cannot target youth at risk all just with more schooling. And this really explains, your study really explains why just foreseeing more hours of schooling is not enough for youth at risk of dropping out of school. You really need to target these different groups, as our host was saying, with different interventions. And I would have a lot more to add in terms of theoretical backing and other variables to be included, but maybe we can talk about this later on. But yes, I think this really shows that you cannot do an intervention that is equal for all of our youth at risk.
Yes, this was the aim of the study, because the hypothesis was this one, that the students that are at risk of dropping out are not equal and cannot be characterized in a unique way. So if you want to plan a prevention program that really can be helpful, you have to take into account that you have really a different profile of students and different needs. So we are trying to move in this direction, and if you have any suggestion, I think that you can write us without problem, so we could take into account it.
Yeah, I would be very glad to contribute if you want to with theoretical things. Yeah, but I think this slide really shows the point. This is really very important, in my opinion.
As I said, I think that there is a last step that we have to do, and is to include in our indicator the students that are enrolled in the EIFP course, because here they are categorized as at-risk students, and as I said, we think that these students are the one in this group, because they have low performance but really high future expectation, and so maybe the profile could be a little bit different if we take into account this.
Yeah, probably other variables include bullying at school and family composition.
Yes.
For instance, lone parents also have,
yeah, presence of unemployment in family.
Unemployment in family. There are other
maybe
variables that
we could work on the socio-economic indicator is a factor that includes education, employment of the parents, and the home resource. But maybe it could be an interesting point to analyze how the membership class change with analyzing these variables separately and not together.
I don't know how to analyze this. It should be thought carefully, of course, but I think, yes, as background variables or as variables for your regression and for your, well, not clustering, not regression. I think there could be other variables to be included, but this is really very, very interesting. I underline that generally speaking, the problem of dropouts in Italy is very, very neglected, I would say, from the education system, although it could be disputed. But I think it's the system is not doing enough for youth at risk of dropping out. And I assume that also a systemic rigidity of the passing from one grade to the other is also a part of the matter. And the rigidity of the system in terms of norms is also another factor. But yeah, we open up a very wide discussion. But yeah, I think your work is extremely interesting. Thank you for doing it.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Allora,
I have one last suggestion.
Yes.
Can I? I was thinking about that. I think that you should be cautious in interpreting citizenship as a predictor or as a potential cause, because I think that foreign students have a higher probability not to be in the not to be enrolled the next year because of migration factors. They have a higher propensity.
Okay.
Okay, so maybe possible. This is obviously a problem. Maybe you could try to repeat your analysis for other years, and in order to try to control for possible differences in migration flows, to try to exploit possible variation in intensity of migration flows as a sort of factor, as an instrument in order to derive more robust estimates on factors related to citizenship. I think that could be a possibility.
Yes, thank you. No, it's a really good point. Thank you. Thank you.
I have another question also. I'm sorry to bother you. Did you compare your study, which is a prospective study on the future, with actual data on students actually dropping out of school? But this is more difficult, I understand. Probably somebody from ISTAT, Barbara, could advise, because I think that one thing is the probability of being a dropout, and you clearly show this, and you clearly show some avenues for intervention on this problem. And from ISTAT, we could have the data of EU Silk or whatever to analyze whether actually the prospects have become real dropouts. That's what I mean. And see the problem from the other side when they are already out of the system.
Yes, I think that we should check this point because at the moment we use only the ILET indicator, but the ILET indicator is really different because they take people from 18 to 24, so it's a really different indicator. On the other hand, there is the completion rate in the lower secondary school and maybe in the upper secondary school, but I'm not sure about it. But we should check it, and we will do it.
Yeah, because we lose human capital. This is a key problem in the system. We lose human capital, and we lose a lot of students in with elect and implicit dispersion, as INVALSI calls it. We lose approximately 30% of our youth, and this is really a big problem, huge problem to address.
Just a last remark. I did it. So if you are interested, we can exchange information, because I did it.
Okay, that's very well.
Data in order to I confronted predictors from final state, which is from Istat rilevazione sulle forze lavoro. I identified dropout early school leavers in microdata and estimated model. So we can, well, I did it. We can exchange information.
Yes, of course.
I'm interested in the issue. Okay.
Yes, you can say also the statistical report on elite, because when you make statistics on elite and work, for example, there is no advantage in work for the elite. The elite don't work. There aren't net need, but there is not advantage also for the foreigner, for immigrant. And you can say also this statistics, statistical report on ritorni occupazionali is in the June of 2020. I think is in you can find on the website of ISTAT.
Well, in my study there was a strong interaction between social background and citizenship. Yes. And social background, it's much more important for Italians.
Okay.
Family human capital is much more important for Italians than for...
so you have studied the impact of the social background and the immigrant status and the interaction between these two variables.
Yeah, especially interaction between family human capital, family education level, okay, education capital in family. It makes a difference much more for Italians than for foreign people. You must consider that in the foreign group there is less variation. Because they tend to have a lower average level.
Yeah, selected people for migrant. I have a selected people.
But the class factor is stronger for Italians. For foreign, it's very strong, the citizenship factor. If you are a foreigner, you are cut out. If you're foreign. If you're Italian, you are penalized if you are poor, if you come from a not educated family. If you are a foreign, you are penalized. Stop.
Yeah, okay. But what I mean is that the richness of the variables that you use for clustering is the point here. Because if you only use socioeconomic indexes, whatever index you want to use, of course, this index is important. I'm not saying it's not important. I recognize its importance. But even when the parents are educated and middle class, you still have the problem. And so this is what I mean by adding more variables to the models.
Well, you can do it with the data from ISTAT because there are plenty of variables. You can use family indicators in order to calculate human capital at family level, for example. Yes. This is very interesting, very intriguing. I think there should be a bridge between INVALSI and ISTAT on this regard, because putting together this source of data, it's very, very fascinating, very interesting.
Absolutely, totally agree. And also on the personal side, I think there are more variables to introduce, and possibly these are variables that now are not being collected by INVALSI anymore because we have problems with the student questionnaire. So this student questionnaire is really important if we want to make any sort of progress in this respect, because you need to have the idea of the student at the individual level with his or her background and motivations, and yeah, some of the variables are there, but I would add more if it's possible, of course.
But a few years ago, INVALSI added a module on dropout intentions, but it was not repeated in the following years, and this is a problem. That was a very rich source of information. I think it was administered in 2015, I think.
It was administered in 2017, 2018, and this was the last the last set of variables on this topic.
Yes, yes, I know, but it was something that, well, since the problem is the problem, as Christina said, maybe we should consider to repeat it or to enrich the content of the questionnaire on these specific topics, because this is the problem.
Yes.
And very interesting also the presentations on the PISA and the INVALSI data on migrants. I wonder if the two sets of data talk to each other. That was my question to the other colleagues. Valeria, Paola.
Yes.
The two data set in terms of putting the performance on the same scale.
Oh, well, this is difficult.
Because this is the next project.
Oh, okay.
Surprise.
Our intention.
Spoiler. Okay. Spoiler. I'm sorry, I didn't know.
Ok, we close this section, and io, se posso, parlo un attimo in italiano perché volevo ringraziare l'Invalsi, Patrizia, Paola, Michele, Chiara, non lo so, mi scorderò qualcuno perché sono stati eccezionali secondo me. Fare una conferenza di 3 giorni così piena e così partecipata in questo momento, siete stati bravissimi, mi pare che è andato tutto bene. È tutto perfetto, anche insomma le condivisioni eccetera, quindi io vi ringrazio e direi che Patrizia, se vuoi chiudere tu, visto che ci stai.
Non diamo l'annuncio che a Lecce, perché noi adesso stiamo andando verso, facciamo uno spoiler, la fusione INVALSI-ISTAT e stiamo andando verso il prossimo convegno dell'AISRE. C'è una sessione organizzata INVALSI-ISTAT da me e Barbara, quindi a Lecce a settembre. Se volete sottomettere qualche lavoro, a noi fa piacere. Perché noi siamo per la collaborazione interistituzionale.
Speriamo di farla in presenza.
Sì, speriamo.
Nell'associazione AISRE degli studi regionali, AISRE, quindi sì, va bene.
E poi faremo magari una sessione a novembre in INVALSI-ISTAT sul prossimo seminario, che sicuramente sarà in presenza.
Beh, dai.
A novembre.
Infatti, va bene. Quindi grazie a tutti.